it mostly goes to the money. That's what it's about. It's about people protecting their money interest, number one. So there's various different ways that they can do that. They will manipulate everybody else, especially their competitors, ruthlessly. And they will do it without any regard to the future well-being of the planet and even their consumers. You see, it's just this kind of greed and reckless action makes these people into tyrants, these horrible, evil oligarchs. But now that I've dehumanized them, I want to tell you that they're probably operating on some system, some sort of good intentions. So I think that everybody tries to have a shred of humanity in them, in their soul, although it may be buried, it may be losing out against the other forces of human nature or demonic nature, devilry, money-mongering, war-mongering. So the powers that be are at the whim of the money and the banks. So when you see these armies marching around, it's the same way that you would understand it throughout all history. Most of these physical forces of men go here and there, attacking different places because they're mercenaries. And these are not wars in the way that the mainstream or in the way that false history, that partial glorified history will paint it as this is a war for this, this is the ideal, this is democracy, or this is freeing the world of evil, or blah, blah, blah. It's not that. They don't tell you the full story is that these are all a series of proxy wars. So throwing this layer onto it or within it of religion has to be understood. Also, racism is another thing. Race is a religion in itself, or religion is a race in itself. What race, religion, government, nations. What I find interesting is that when you look out into the world and you try to figure out reality, you end up with how you divide things and see them as comprehensive forces, like definitive entities. And then you say to yourself, well, it's always overlapping with this and this and this. And that's the way you get more of an accurate view of reality. So what I started with is that the powers that be would have to be understood as flexible. There's so much overlapping going on, and you have to prioritize what the forces are. Now, what you usually get for the mainstream is they're prioritizing whatever their bottom line is for the money, or whatever the government is telling them they should do, because it's the government looking out for its own profits and its own power. Okay, so that's not actually the priorities that you should see. That's not the primary forces. You should prioritize what are the most important forces. Priority is primary. Priority is the major players in this. So I'll remind you, it's about money. So we're talking about the petrol dollar. We're talking about the other technologies that are going on. Fracking is very closely related to that. They've started fracking in places in Asia and well, I'm not sure exactly of the details of the history of hydrofracturing, because it might be assumed if you were in the West and in the media and hearing the activism that's going on, that it had probably started in the United States in the last few years and was maybe a response to this movement away from, remember the offshore drilling thing, and how, this all stems from this big mess and confusion they did around what was the name of that well in the Gulf of Mexico? Remember that horrific thing that they used to market Corexit. And so this was a big money deal, and it was BP. You know that they're to blame, but it was also Halliburton and former Vice President Dick Cheney was heavily involved with this business scam that they did. And prior to that, you didn't hear a lot about fracking. It might have been going on, starting at certain places in the United States, maybe in Pennsylvania, maybe in Texas. Now they've got it going on. They're trying to do it in New York. They're already doing it in California. Obviously, they're doing a whole lot of it in West Virginia. So all of this is also tied in with the coal industry and how the coal is being taken off the mountaintops. They're just blasting away the natural geographic features of the planet itself. And they're taking the coal and they're shipping it very far across the world to China. So it's all about the money. Now, when you're focusing more on the Middle East, you've got all of that going on, but you've also got the opium, and that's the heroin business, and that's why heroin is up. And articles have just come out this week, which shows you that the United States is now being the target market. And this stems back to, I've given you all the historical research in my book of the turn of the century, the 1800s, into the 20th century, of the hegemony and solidification of the British East Indies rule, Boxer Rebellion, all that kind of thing, because it's one of the most lucrative markets. This is what comes out of the Middle East, especially not so much Iraq, but Afghanistan. So the forces that are in there are always operating according to what's going to be best for them, not according to what we might idealize about, this is what Iran is about, this is what Islam as a whole, if you want to call it a civilization, then Christianity would be its own civilization. But I do not use the word civilization like that improperly, as some people do. Islam is just as much of a Frankensteinian monster creation as is Christianity, as is Judaism, and you can obviously see it with Hinduism, which is more ancient than all the other ones, apparently. Because what happens is there is a phrase, co-opted, or taken over, distorted, used, made into a puppet. Basically, everything has its starting point. Just like, I'll give you one example. When Yeshua, who's called Jesus, who is the Christ, that's his title, Jesus Christ, was alive, whatever happened, the Muslims actually don't even believe he was crucified. They believe that was Judas put on the cross, and there's a confusion with the historical record, which probably the Jews were manipulating at that time. But aside from trying to figure out all these things, we just have to understand that there is a Jesus Christ historical figure, and at that time, as much influence as he had around the world, which is like a cutting edge fringe of a spiritual revolutionary movement, was then co-opted. You have various different evolutions of it. I don't even want to say evolution, devolutions of it. The first one with Paul, St. Paul, who was Saul. You have the, after several centuries, you have Emperor Constantine, the creation of Constantinople, Eastern Orthodox, the Hagia Sophia was that cathedral that they call it. That was actually a mosque. You have these evolutions that are going on in the Vatican, and all the way up to now. We have Vatican Council II in the 1960s, and the point now where you have a pope step down, and now there's a new pope, as the other pope is still alive. Pope Francis, the present pope who shares his seat, coming out with all these statements that he's making about the bank should get ethics and blah, blah, blah. You know, it's nice for him to say those things, but with the reputation that they have and their track record as the Vatican, the Holy See, how much of an impact is that going to have? How much is that just going to go have its effect, or will it just get watered down and people will just doubt them anyhow? So, you know, they're not going to be that effective. They are best to sit there and be assimilated into a new force that's going to be coming up, as I'm going to speak about in upcoming talks. But the tracing of history through these religious movements that devolve this way shows you that any money powers can come in when they want something done and manipulate factions under these you know, false religious banners. People that labor under the idea that you know, they have a version of the religion that is worth fighting for, and you know, they'll march around. You know, it's all crusades, but they're working for the drugs, they're working for the oil, they're working just for their bloodthirst. They just want to go out and kill people, and this is a horrible thing, because everyone will be condemned for that. There's karma. See, that's a principle that's not even a religion. There's cause and effect, and that's an interesting thing about what goes on in the world. So we get reborn. Whatever we do now, you run around, you see these people as mercenaries and doing these things for money and believing this thing. They have to go out and take action because it's great good intentions, and they're waving this flag, and they have to put down the heretics of whatever religion it is. Whatever one, all of them are included. Within any nation or subdivisions of nations, it's always these are the worst ones of this religion. And just like Jesse Ventura was saying,